So a while back, I made a 4000 damage guide on Apex, but that video is pretty outdated and it's pretty bad. So I wanted to make an updated guide to share with you guys all of the tips and tricks that I know that help me get 4000 damage games almost every day. So I'm gonna break this video up into 3 different parts. First, we'll cover the meta, which is the weapons and characters. Then we'll cover the 2 main strategies that I use to get 4K games. Then I'll share a bunch of in-game tips and tricks by breaking down one of my own 4000 damage games. But before we begin, on my last guide, I said if we could get 500 likes, I would do a Bronze to Masters stream. Well, that video got well over 3 times the like goal, so now I have to do that stream. So if this video can get 500 likes, I'll try to get 4000 damage on every single legend in a single stream. It could take days, I have literally no idea, but if you want to see that happen, be sure to leave a like below. And now, let's get started. So first, let's cover the meta behind getting 4K games. Obviously, you're going to want to get the badge on your favorite legend, and if that legend happens to be a movement character or a defensive character, then you're in good luck. But if that character isn't somebody with a whole lot of utility when it comes to movement or defense, I would highly advise that you tell your teammates to play those kinds of legends. So first off, the legends that I can highly recommend you use are Octane, Horizon, Pathfinder, and Valkyrie. These legends are really good for repositioning, whether it's during fights or in order to initiate fights. With a movement character like this, you can quickly traverse across the map and you can take high ground whenever you need to. But if movement isn't really your thing, then playing a defensive legend such as Caustic, Rampart, Gibraltar, or Newcastle allows for some really great defensive play, which can come in really handy when you're trying to farm damage. If you yourself don't enjoy playing defensive characters, it's always helpful to ask your teammates to play them just so they can help you out. Next up is weapons. Now there's 2 primary classes that you should definitely be using in every one of your 4K games. Those are ARs and LMGs. Currently, my favorite weapons for getting high damage games are the R301, the Flatline, the Spitfire, the Rampage, the Havoc, and my personal cheat code is the Hemlock. These weapons are all really great for getting high damage because of their high DPS and medium range capabilities. The Hemlock is also especially useful because it can conserve ammo pretty decently, which means you can farm for even longer because you're not wasting any ammo. On your primary weapon, which should be an AR or LMG, you're going to want to have a 3x or 2 to 4x scope. This will be the primary weapon that you use when you're engaging in medium range fights. For your secondary weapon, it's very important that you have a close range weapon that you can use to put down a lot of damage really fast in case you need to fight in close range. You should definitely avoid using snipers, and I can't recommend using shotguns or pistols. In my opinion, the best secondaries are SMGs because of their high damage per second capabilities. If you're running a heavy ammo setup, you should use the Car SMG, or if you're using a light ammo setup, you should use the R99. Oh, and of course, if you find something like a Volt or Mastiff, you should pick those up as your secondary because they are way too strong. That just about covers it for the meta. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff. Next up, let's cover the 2 main strategies that I use for 4K games. When it comes to getting high damage, you're going to need to initiate a strategy known as damage farming. This is where you try to get extra damage off of your fights. If you were to just simply kill each of your enemies right away, you would need to kill like half the lobby in order to get 4000 damage. Obviously, that's really unreasonable, so you're going to need to make your fights last as long as possible to get as much damage as possible. As far as I've seen, there are basically 2 main strategies that people use. I'm going to call the first one the final fight strategy, and the second one the full farm strategy. The final fight strategy is the more common strategy, and it just involves you going for as many kills as possible throughout the majority of the match. But once you make it to around the top 3 teams, you will start to damage farm. For this strategy to be viable, you're going to need at least 2000 initial damage in order to end the game with 4K. Essentially, once you make it to the final teams, you start to play as defensive as you can, and you try to rack up damage off of the last few teams only. Now obviously, this does present a bit of a challenge. What if those last 2 teams don't want to farm? Well, in that case, you're kind of out of luck. That's one of the reasons that this strategy isn't quite as viable, but sometimes you're just having a good game and realize that you're pretty close and try to farm at the very end, and the majority of the time, this strategy will get the job done. But the next strat, and the one that I've been using a lot more recently, is the full farm strategy. For this strategy, you want to try to fight as slow as possible throughout all of the game. Your main goal is to try to get at least 1000 damage per fight. This way, you only need to take about 4 fights, and because you're trying to farm the entire game, you aren't running any inherent risks with one team not wanting to farm. Now, because you are playing slower and expending a lot more resources throughout the entire match, I recommend that you have a Loba on your team to help you collect things like ammo and shields. But this isn't necessarily needed. As you're taking your fights, you want to focus on cracking the enemy shields as much as possible. Aim for taking third-party fights, and focus really strong on your positioning. Make sure you're holding a good spot that can allow you to put down damage consistently, and only push into a fight when it's necessary. You're going to see a few examples of when it's necessary to push in the gameplay breakdown. Now, this strategy has two potential uses. It can either help you get to the 2000 damage threshold before the final fight, or if done properly, it can get you all the way up to 3 or 4k damage in and of itself. That's why I personally think this strategy is a bit more viable and a lot more reliable, and it tends to be the strategy that I use the most frequently. Now, right before we jump into a gameplay breakdown, here's a couple final words. First off, you do not need to be good to get this badge, as you're gonna see in the gameplay. Like, I'm playing really bad. Secondly, getting 4k damage really depends on the lobby that you're playing, but understanding how to get the damage will prepare you for once that lobby finally arrives. Alright, with those couple things out of the way, let's jump into a full game breakdown full of a bunch of tips and tricks. Alright, so here we are on Storm Point. Here we are on Storm Point, and we're going to be jumping into the blue zone. Now, right away, I'm realizing there's going to be 2 teams with us, so I want to make the first fight nice and quick so that we are prepared for the next team to start to fight us. Now, right away, my loot is nothing exceptional. I have an alternator and a Mozambique, but knowing that my team is starting to fight, I want to be part of it to try to get a bit of damage for myself. If you're ever in a situation like that guy, don't do what that guy did. After just a few seconds, the next team did start to push us, so we had to look at that. Sadly, because I took damage, I was completely out of this fight, but my team was going crazy on them. Knowing that my teammates were doing a lot of damage here, I know I was coming in late, so I wanted to make up for this damage that I had lost. So I'm going to try to thirst the enemies. This is going to give me at least an extra 100 damage per knocked enemy. Now, I didn't expect this guy to re-peek me, but he did, and it got me killed, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. Now, this man right here was rocking the whole M600 Spitfire, so I was going to have to grab that. But after looting for a little while, I realized there was nothing left in this area, so I started to rotate out.
Bye, I guess.
In classic teammate format, the team was not with me at all. They were just trying to loot, whereas I was trying to take a fight.
A bit late for that.
It's not a bit late for... Anyway, I needed to go take this next fight, but knowing that I am a solo, I am going to want to play just a bit more safe. Now, generally, playing for the high ground is a great idea. Being on a roof is going to give you a big advantage over the enemies. But, as you're about to see, this was the worst idea I could have taken. For some reason, everybody had an angle on this roof, and no matter where I was getting beamed, so I decided to reassess the situation. Even though I'm low on shields, I needed to scare this guy away from me, so I put down a few shots. I felt totally unsafe where I was, so I decided to rotate out of the fight and return once people had forgotten about me. Now that the fight collapsed a bit, high ground is going to be a good idea. Again, thirsting enemies is going to give you a bit of extra damage that might come in really useful. Pay attention to those voice lines because that just told me a new team was in the area and I went to look. This time, we finally did end the fight, so I'm gonna go and grab some loot. When it comes to inventory management, I'm gonna aim for about 400 ammo, 4 batteries, a couple medkits, and a few grenades. Realizing that we're moving into the mid/late game now, I decided to swap off of the shotgun and use a flatline instead. Again, running ARs and LMGs is very useful for when it comes to damage farming. I rotated towards the next spot that had any shooting, and tried to surprise attack this team. But of course, because I'm just standing in some weeds in the open, I'm getting completely beamed. Luckily, I'm able to get out and I'm able to fully reset. Now that I can find a different angle, we can start to take this fight a bit more slow, and I realize that this is a great opportunity to farm a bit of damage. I'm going to focus on getting as many shots down onto all 3 of the enemies as possible, focusing mostly on cracking their shields as much as I can. Now, I didn't necessarily want to knock that guy right there, but because my teammates were looking at him, I knew that he was going to die no matter what. As I said before, this is not my best gameplay, and you are seeing that right now. Now, I spent like 300 ammo during this fight, but it was worth it. It was able to give me 2k damage, but knowing that I'm out of resources, I want to loot up nice and quickly before I move on to the next fight. I didn't have to go far because I immediately ran into a new team. But this fight looks really good. We are both in zone. Both of us just want to hold our positioning and put shots down, which is exactly what I'm looking for to farm damage off of them. So of course, after spending a bunch of resources onto this fight, things take a turn for the worse. A team makes a full rotation behind us and starts to get aggressive. And this is where things go from worse to much worse. The entire team Ash ults right behind us and pushes us out of our positioning. Things manage to get worse still because they have a Sheila. Fighting that is a complete death wish, so I need to rotate out even if it's going to get my teammates killed. Once I have a much better position, I still want to try to back up my teammate and put some more damage down, but I do not want to push this fight because it's way too risky. Right there, two bad things happen. First, my entire team dies, and the other team involved in this fight also dies, which means that I'm currently facing a 1v3. Obviously, I don't like those odds, so I need to get out of this area as fast as I can. Lucky for me, I'm only about 500 damage away from the actual 4k, so right now my primary goal is to third party the final fight between these last two teams. That's going to give me the best odds of success, and it should allow me to get just the right amount of damage. Unfortunately for me, my plans are put to rest because a team sees me and starts to push me. So right now I want to try to hold the best position possible that allows me to put damage down without taking a lot of damage myself. Right now that Gibby is my primary enemy because he's probably going to ult me off this roof. Just as I suspected, he drops his ultimate and forces me back inside. But because I can quickly find a new angle, I'm able to get a knock on him even though he didn't expect it. My new primary goal is to hold this team off for as long as possible so that the other team eventually pushes in and fights them for me. Lucky for me, this is exactly what happens. Now, I don't want to involve myself too much in this fight because it could put me at risk, but I actually didn't involve myself enough, and one of the teams ended up killing the other team, which once again put me into a 1v3. My idea is that they're going to be pretty low health, so pushing up for a quick knock is the logical thing to do. However, I can't hit shots, and I was blatantly wrong. They were fully healthy. Again, did I mention that this is not my best gameplay? Well, you can't really stand any chance against a full team aping you, but it didn't matter. This team might have had the champion screen, but I had the 4k damage. Well, that's gonna do it. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and I wish you the best of luck on your 4k journey. Well, that was stupid.